Okay, good morning, everybody. Right, welcome to the members attending and to our officers and any members of the public and press who've joined us today, either in the room or are watching the meeting on the live stream. Combined Authority allows filming and photography at public meetings, so please do feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. But could everybody turn off their mobile phones, which includes me, or put them on silent or vibrate, and their noisy laptops. There are no fire drills scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, we better get out. And I remind members and officers that the meeting will be recorded. So this is the meeting of the Environment and Sustainable Communities Committee. Well, thank you very much for those members who are attending. We'll start off. Have we any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have received apologies from the Business Board representatives, Belinda Clark and Tina Barsby, also from the Mayor and from Councillor Laws.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we are quorate. Now, does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or a non-statutory disclosable interest on any item being discussed today? No, but if something pops up, then you can just mention it during the meeting. So the first item is the item 2, and that's the minutes and the action log. Are there any issues arising from the minutes? No. Can I just ask, when will the sustainable land use work come back to us? Any idea, Steve? November. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you, Adrian. Super. Thank you very much indeed. Good, because that's an interesting one. Okay, so if there aren't any issues, is the committee happy to approve the minutes from the 12th of June 2023 as an accurate record and to note the action log? Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. So that is approved. And I believe we don't have any public questions today. No. Okay. Moving on to the forward plan, which I've actually slightly preempted with that question. Are there any issues relating to the forward plan from anyone? No. Sorry. Okay, fine. In that case, we're just being asked to note the forward plan. Yep. Okay, so the public forward plan's been noted. Item 5 is the Directorate Highlight Report. And Steve Cox, who's the Executive Director for Place and Connectivity, will introduce this. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. This is a report on meetings or projects that are not otherwise covered on the agenda. We have a climate partnership update on the agenda, so there's quite a bit of update in that item separately to this. And this is, as you'll see, set out a number of projects that we're progressing are covered in paragraphs 3.1 to 3.4, where we're working with partners. Any queries members have got on those, very happy to pick those up. In paragraph 2.1, just worth pointing to the work that's ongoing to look at climate change targets, to rationalise and come forward with a single set of targets that we can work towards. That's going to be a key theme for the Climate Summit in November. One of the themes for that, which we'll then obviously discuss and debate progress and come back to this committee in January. And there's some further funding we're looking to secure through the board meeting later this month to help us with data around climate net zero targets. The other point to note is on the Peterborough Bus Depot. There's an item in 2.2 just giving an update. There's a further detailed paper going to the Transport Committee on Wednesday, which is an update on progress with that project, which I think links across to the ambitions that we have for net zero and certainly around electric vehicles and buses. And also worth noting that there is now a further round of Zebra funding that's opened that we'll be working with local authority partners, particularly Peterborough, to see whether we can secure that funding in this round. The only final point, I think, 3.4, is just to say the work on the infrastructure delivery framework will be going out to get some specialist support and advice on that. And that's a piece of work really important in looking at the blockages and obstacles to sustainable growth across the area. and what we need to do, or partners need to do, to help overcome some of those blockages. So that work will be moving forward through the autumn, and we'll bring that back to this committee, I expect in January, once we have the interim outcomes from that piece of work. But happy to leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Steve. Any questions? Lara?
Thank you for this style of report. I find it really helpful, and I'm actually going to share it with all my colleagues as well, so they know what's happening. Section 2.3 about the local nature recovery strategy. I know that Natural Cambridgeshire is sort of our delivery agency for that work. Are we able to use the importance of this project to help us navigate any budget ideas in the future about funding for Natural Cambridgeshire, because they're going to be our expert in this area?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's an item we'll bring back, the LNRS will bring back to this committee in November as well. We've got an item later on the agenda, which is a budget update, and there's an opportunity in that item for members to look at the what's currently in the budget and where there are opportunities to extend the funding for key partners as well as other projects. So perhaps under that item we can raise that particular point.
Thank you.
And I agree with the points about the importance of Natural Cambridgeshire as a key partner for us.
Thank you. Any other questions, Lara? No, Lorna, and then Mike.
Thank you. You're talking about shared targets or targets in common. Is that shared or in common within the combined authority in its different aspects, or is it shared across our constituent authorities?
Yeah, it's both. So it's getting targets that we can apply across the work of the combined authority, but also importantly, agreeing across the area, across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, targets that we can work towards. I think we need to recognise in that work, and I'm sure the work will reveal that there's different paces of progress being made, and different projects will contribute differently to achieving those net zero ambitions in different parts of the area. But it is looking to get a single set of ambitions for delivering net zero and a target across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough that we can all work towards in different ways, because there'll be different priorities in different parts of the area.
Thank you very much. And do you want to come back on that, Lorna?
I'd like to come back. Yes. Yes. Target across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. I think we're in a bit of a muddle at the moment across the combined authority area with these targets, it's fair to say. The national government target is 2050. The county council's target for Cambridgeshire as an area is 2045. Huntingdonshire's target, unless Councillor Davenport-Ray can tell me that it has changed since I last looked at it, was 2040, which was somewhat interesting given that it is the highest emitting district in the entire county, most of which is transport related from the major roads that run through it. And I see no idea how they are going to achieve net zero 5 years before Cambridgeshire as a whole. If they do, it's fantastic, because it means we can all, really, really go for it, confident that Huntingdonshire's doing all the hard work. And East Cambridgeshire's target is 2035, which raised my eyebrows, but I believe to be a mistake. So we'll see what comes out of that. But clearly, all of that needs to hang together. There's been a lot of interest in carbon emissions in Cambridge from transport, which of course is the lowest emitting district across the combined authority area, with one of the absolutely minuscule carbon emissions relating to transport, if the figures are to be believed. So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty, and I do think it's really important that we have targets in common, but also understanding in common of the data, what the data mean, what we can do to address those different aspects. Some will be easy, some, like peatland, will be incredibly difficult for some authorities, which may be why Huntingdonshire's going to storm ahead and do it all by 2040, I don't know. But certainly I think it would be really helpful to get not only a shared target, but also shared data, understanding of the data, and for that to be understood across the officers and members of this body and all its constituent authorities. That's I have a dream.
I'll just comment first, and then I'll bring in Steve. So you're quite right. It seems very odd that we have this variation in targets, but I think we have to accept that politics plays a part in this, and this isn't a science, unfortunately, and isn't completely objective, and it's to do with different political priorities and so on. And I think that's where we've got these strange anomalies from. But I'd like to say to Steve, what kind of leadership role can the combined authority take to try and get everybody, in broadly in the same area?
Yeah, thank you. It's a really important question. So I mentioned we're looking for some further funding through the September board meeting to help us get to that baseline of understanding data in a consistent way across all of the local authorities and other partners. I think that's a starting point, because I think there's different measures and different KPIs that are being used. So if we can do that, then I think we can then start to have a further discussion about what do we need to do in order to achieve the targets that we're setting across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And I think the thematic approach at the summit in November will be a great opportunity to bring people together to look at some of that data and hopefully come out of that with an approach which is consistent.
Yes, so if I could I'll take Lara and then I'll come back to you if I may. And I think other people might like to comment on this issue as well, because of course we all have different problems, don't we, to solve. Lara.
I think one of the things that would be really helpful at the summit is just to have in one document what all the targets are in one place, because for many of us, it's hard to keep track of what that is. But just a point of clarification about Huntingdonshire. So 2040 is our target for internal council net zero. And in fact, the reasons you're talking about are one of the reasons why I've been hesitant to set a district target. A couple of meetings ago, we were looking at the carbon data for our region, and we can't determine which emissions come from people driving through Cambridgeshire or people living in Cambridgeshire. And we have upper tier authorities that have their targets. So perhaps I have felt in Huntingdonshire, it's been better to have our own internal target for council operations and then set our goal to do as much influencing as possible with the residents in our district, but not necessarily set a target.
Thank you. That's very much the position that South Cambs has taken as well. Lorna.
Yes, I would agree. I think we all have our own internal targets for our own internal operations, and those will be very different. And I can understand why they might be different in the context of we're all different authorities with different priorities and do things differently. It's the aggregating the whole area target that is the issue. But I just wanted to come back on the climate summit, because I've seen absolutely nothing about the climate summit other than in minutes of meetings I'm not entitled to attend. So I would love to know more about this climate summit. How big is it? Who's in charge? Who's invited? What's the agenda going to be? Who's involved? And I've seen absolutely nothing of that anywhere. So I would love a bit more information. And I know that there are a lot of members of the public who would love a lot more information about it as well.
Thank you, Steve. Do you want to?
Yeah, very happy to share that with the committee. There's an item later on the agenda which will provide an update on where we are with it. There was a discussion at a previous committee earlier in the summer here, so we can pick up on that and also provide answers to some of those questions. I think, Councillor Dupre.
Very important. I mean, we all have busy diaries, and other people's diaries are probably equally busy, so we need to get this blocked out. Any other questions, Mike?
Is that working?
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to raise a question. It's kind of related actually to the discussion we've just been having under 2.1. And that's obviously the accuracy of climate data and monitoring data is really important to get that consistency across partner authorities as well as overall. I just wondered, there's a reference to a funding request, and I wonder if you can say, do we know how much that is, what's required? Do we have an assessment of what's required to get this data accurate?
Can you pick that? Thank you.
The request that will be going is for £100,000 to go towards data analysis to pick up exactly the concerns that have been raised today.
Okay, if there aren't any more questions, we've been asked to note this report. We're happy to note it. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, moving on to item 6, which is the affordable housing programme and the update on implementation. And I think Asma is updating us on this. Thank you, Asma.
Good morning, everyone. As I've mentioned, at the writing of the report, there were 703, but now there's 717 units completed as of today. Progress is going very well, but it is very slow at the moment. We do have issues with contractors on site and supply issues as well, delays in materials as well. I was expecting Girton to finish this month. Hopefully the windows have been delivered, but it's now finding time for contractors to install them. So again, delays there. Northminster is ahead of schedule and is doing well. Some of the CKH sites, which I was hoping to have completed at the end of this month, have been stalled, unfortunately, due to contractual issues. And the site at Alconbury is going really well. Those were the units that were delivered in August, which has raised the number of units to 717. There's 85 units completed on the Alconbury site with Man GPN, and they've got a further 14, which they hope to finish shortly. 24 High Street, Girton is progressing very well. I went and visited the site in July. Unfortunately, there is slippages, but we are hoping for the whole programme to complete by the end of 2025. That ends my report.
Thank you very much, Asma. I think you must have been constantly on building sites by the sounds of it. So, so thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions on this one? Yes, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Item 2.1, there says the visitors of the housing programme manager has been successful. What is meant by successful? In what way? So the successful bit is that the fact that you're interacting with everyone who's involved in the projects. Okay, thank you. And on Appendix 1, what is the difference? I've got here on one of them, 640k for Wicken, and paid to date is 638k, approximately 2.3k grant is not is this not taken up, not been paid back, or it's not required anymore?
Thank you, Asma.
The reason why there's a less payment in grant is there's a clawback clause in all of our projects. So if a property is been sold through shared ownership over and above the threshold, there's a clawback mechanism. So we get money back, which is not given fully in the grant. So there are a couple of projects like that where they have sold more than their shares and we claim some money back, so they don't get the full grant. So it's just a slightly lower grant rate.
Yes.
Sorry. And the Alexander House is 4.84 million, but there's nothing, no figures in the drawdown side of it. Could you please explain?
Thank you, Asma.
Actually, I can't because I don't deal with the loans, unfortunately. I only deal with the affordable housing programme, but my colleague Nick will be able to explain that further. Sorry.
Thank you. So, I mean, my understanding is that the Lara Home ones have been repaid, haven't they? They've been repaid in full. Isn't that in the text? Oh, okay, fine. Is that all right? We'll pick that up as the next item then. Okay, fine. Yes, and are you done, Martin, for now? Okay, thank you, Lorna.
Thank you. It may be just me. I'm not really a spreadsheet sort of person, but I do find it quite difficult to navigate through this appendix. I don't know what order these projects are put in, but it seems to me to be fairly random. It's not order of start date. It's not order of final completion date. It's not order of number of units funded. It's not order of payment, finances. I just don't know why it's ordered the way it is. It would be really helpful to have some kind of reference number or sequence number for each item, so that, as Councillor Goodall was trying earlier to explain which line he was on which page, it would be helpful to go, actually, it's item 0043, whatever, something that would help us do that. It would also be helpful, I think, to have them ordered in a way that was the ones that have been completed first, and then the ones that are still outstanding in some way. And it would also, I think, be useful to have some kind of exception report on where the number of units funded doesn't tie up with the number of completions in finality for the completed schemes, and why, and an explanation where the amount that was originally indicated, the CPA funding, is different from the amount finally paid out, and why. And they don't have to be pages and pages, but a sentence or two to say this was because of clawback, or this was because of whatever circumstances beyond our control, or whatever. All of that would make it much easier to navigate what we're looking at here, and it would be really, really helpful to do something with that. And I think it would help us as members. Well, certainly would help me. I can't speak for other members, but it would help me to understand much better what's going on here and be able to ask sensible questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. I think that's a very, very good point. So we'll take that away. I mean, if we could sort of colour code the ones that are done and dusted, perhaps, and if we can put a column in with some sort of narrative there as well, and then perhaps some sort of numbering.
Sorry, Councillor, could I just intervene in
please?
We had all of this information in the previous housing committees with numbering and everything. The numbering that it's in is based on the date that they came to committee. So if you look for the funding date, it works like that in order. We had all the information put in, and all councillors previously said they wanted all the information out and the bare basics on there. So I'm reverting backwards. Your previous committee said, we don't want all of that. We just want it removed. We want the bare information. So that's what I've done. And I've come back to.
So my apologies for making your life difficult. But new committee, new world, and with perhaps if you and Steve would just go and have a think about it and see.
I think there are two issues I've raised. There's one that is navigability, and there's one that is actual content. And I think those might helpfully be taken separately.
Okay, right, Steve.
Well, just to say thank you, and we'll find a way forward, which is somewhere between the two. But perhaps we'll share what we think is an adapted layout with members to see whether that hits the mark before we come back to the next committee.
Thank you very much indeed, Alara.
I'm going to choose to be positive and assume this report won't need to come to us too many more times, I hope, as the program is tying itself up. But I do have two questions about the appendix. The first one is the MAN GPM sites at Alconbury. You mentioned it in the text as well about issues with contractors. That worries me both because it's on my patch, but also because as this program ends, is there some way that we can feed that back into a tender process so that when it's not us in the future who's tending for contractors, that they know the experience that we've had? And then the other question was about the Husk sites. So it appears to me that they have had over 600 grand from the combined authority since March 2021 sitting in their bank account. Although that might be an insignificant amount of income that might have been accrued in interest, it is something I'd be interested to know. Are there any ways for us to recoup some of that from that amount of money that's been sitting elsewhere?
Asma, is that something for Nick to pick up as well?
No. Right. With Man GPM, they were the actual company that put in the bid. The contractors are Crest Nicholson. and they had procured Crest Nicholson, and they're the contractors, and there were the problems with those contractors. I'd been on the site 3 or 4 times to find out why there were so many delays, and they said it's the contractors. So they had subcontractors who were poor performance, they weren't attending. So it wasn't Man GPM who was the problem, it was the contractors who were building on site. And Crest Nicholson is the biggest contractor on that site. I went back very recently, have seen them literally overhauled the whole load of contractors on site. So there's new site manager, new contractors coming in, and that's why the site is actually completing a lot quicker than I'd actually thought. So hopefully we've only got 14 units left on that site. So it wasn't Man GPM that were the problems, the contractors underneath. With regards to the husk sites, they're called garage sites. We're not allowed to use the word husks, unfortunately. CKH have contacted me about the garage sites. There have been some party wall issues. We gave them money back, half of the grant at contract, and for some unknown reasons, there have been these issues with party walls because they're garage sites and they're infills, so they're causing a lot of headache. CKH, they have confirmed to me that those sites are going to go through it. It's just going to take a little bit longer while they deal with the party wall issues.
Okay, thank you. Any other issues on this item? Seems a miracle that anything's getting built at the moment, doesn't it? The market's in a real mess, actually. So thank you very much for all you've done and for your explanations. So we are noting this report, which I think we've done, and are we happy? Everyone's happy to move on. Okay. So we're over to Nick now in the housing loans update, which we've been preempting a bit. So Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. The Combined Authorities Housing Strategy of 2018 divided the affordable housing programme funding into 2 pots. £60 million was allocated for traditional grant funding, and £40 million was to be used for the then Mayor's plan for a revolving fund to support the delivery of additional affordable housing. The revolving fund was used to provide 5 loans to development companies, as detailed in the table at Appendix A to this report. There is 1 loan that is yet to be repaid that was made to Histon Road Development Limited Liability Partnership. The loan facility of £9,637,000 was granted in March 2020 to support the development of 27 houses at Histon Road in Cambridge, and the loan was initially to be repaid by October 2022. In August 2020, the Combined Authorities Board authorised a 7-month extension to the loan facility and a 5-month interest-free period to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19. The final repayment date was then varied to the 7th of May 2023. In May 2023, the developer was experiencing further delays, and the Combined Authorities Board noted a decision made by the former interim chief executive to extend the loan for a second time. The final repayment date was then extended to the 30th of September 2023 or earlier, which is quite close by. The default interest rate of 10.25% applies from 7th of May to 31st of August, and the rate of 15% applies from 31st of August to the 30th of September. In respect of the current position, this can be seen at the balance sheet at Appendix A, which shows the outstanding balance of the loan as £4,502,703, excluding interest, on the 23rd of August. Since then, there's been 1 further completion, and another 7 units will need to complete before the end of September if the loan is to be repaid from sales proceeds. A recent monitoring surveyor's report indicates this will be possible, but no action can be taken by the Combined Authority unless a default occurs on the 30th of September. And this concludes my report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions on that? Yes, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. on the Histon Road site, which I'm very familiar with. It's in my ward in Cambridge City, in Sarbury. And I've had quite a bit of engagement with Lara Holmes, and I know that it's been a bit of a problematic site. But I just wonder how confident we are that they're going to meet the latest loan deadline.
We had a report in August because we employ the services of a monitoring surveyor, and they were satisfied that the loan enough completions would take place for the loan to be repaid. I then contacted Lara just to check they're up to speed, and I was informed that there was a delay in some joinery work, but that would be a couple of weeks. And the monitoring surveyor's recent report from August, I only received that last week, and that indicates, or he estimates, that the units should all be complete by the 30th of September, but it's going to be very, very tight. Now, extremely tight. Now, I don't really want to go into much further detail on that because I don't want to discuss the commercial activities of a firm, and I don't want to cause any concern to prospective purchasers. But if it's not repaid by the 30th of September, then it should be repaid very soon after. Also, there is an option for the developer to pay the loan from alternative means. And there is a second funder on the scene, so it's quite possible that additional proceeds can be raised by alternative means just to pay off the combined authority by the due date. So I'm quite confident that there won't be a default, and the combined authority can't really do anything unless there is a default.
Are you happy with that, are you? Yeah, I mean, it should be because it's location. It should be, very, very successful, shouldn't it? Okay, any more questions? Yes, Martin.
Just two quick questions. When will the review be available? Or have you got a date for when you're expecting that to be available on 5.1? And secondly, is the independent monitoring surveyors report available to everyone?
Thank you, Nick.
Firstly, thanks for those questions. The paragraph 5.1, internal audit implications, it does state that the initial internal review will take place when the matter of the remaining loan concludes. Now, the format of that review, we will take advice from our financial colleagues who manage that process of audit. So I'm not sure who's going to do the review because obviously we can't review ourselves. So it will be internal but independent as well of the housing team. The second part of your question about the monitoring surveyor's report, there's a caveat in the introductory paragraph that says it's for the sole purposes of the borrowers, and it can't be used or publicised, etc. Perhaps there's confidential commercial information in there, but I'm quite happy to share those if I am able to.
Okay, any other questions? No, okay, so moving swiftly on. So again, we've been asked to note this report, which we've done, and we will move on now. Thank you very much indeed, Nick, that's marvellous, thank you. To the Climate Partnership update, and I think that's Adrian. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is a standing item for the committee to receive an update on the work of the Climate Partnership, which is chaired by the Mayor, but it's a multi-agency grouping looking at promoting the Climate Action Plan and its delivery. You've got the report in front of you, but I will highlight just a couple of things that have come up in conversation just to follow on from the previous queries. So in terms of the targets for the area. We had a presentation at the partnership from Harriet Harthen from Hughes Hall, Cambridge, around locally determined contributions, which is very much about how an area would look to agree its contributions in terms of reducing emissions to deliver the 2050 target. And that's the sort of process that will allow the debate about different targets, both internally, what we can locally influence and what we're relying on changes in other national policy or movements, for example, was raised of traffic through our area. And so, as Steve said, there is a bid for some funding to take that forward and have that debate around the data. Under 2.6, I referred to a couple of Innovate UK funded projects. So phase one was completed, and I noted in there that the authorities were leading on bids for the second phase. Those have gone in, so we're now in the waiting to see the outcome of that, and that could be quite significant amounts of revenue support, up to £5 million per project, looking at some of the financial barriers to mobilising investment in net zero, so green investment. And finally, under 2.8, I've referenced the Climate Summit, which we mentioned at the last meeting, and the dates there, it's 9th of November, so everyone on the committee should shortly be receiving a hold the date for that. In terms of content, we have broadly three key themes. One is pathway to net zero, so just exactly that issue we've just picked up on about targets. How do we adapt to the future? So the Climate Partnership have highlighted we've got a lot of work around emissions, but adapting to the changing climate, as we've seen recently, is equally is important. And finally, how do we make sure that everyone finds the right opportunity in the new low carbon economy? So we are talking to the business board to get their feedback on their views on how the transition to a low carbon economy could support our area and what challenges we might face.
Thank you very much indeed. Are we planning on talking to the Oxford Cambridge Partnership to make sure that our summer, it'd be quite nice if they were involved in some way, because of course they've got the wider, the kind of wider remit.
Yeah, we have discussed how we can fit them into the agenda. What we're planning to do is a number of panel events, and therefore we can have representatives from the partnership and the others as well to debate those wider issues.
Okay. How are we funding this, by the way, the summit?
There's a similar bid being made for the board in September
Okay.
for us to fund it out of the Treasury Management savings.
Okay. So I wonder whether we can get any money out of the OCP as well. But,
We could certainly ask. It's a good point. Thank you.
well, yeah, as well. Questions? Lara, yes, and then Martin.
I have several questions. Would you prefer one at a time? The first one is about the climate action report. I'm happy to see that you're going to rethink the RAG ratings there. When will this committee receive the next version of that report?
So the next partnership's in October, and then we'll be considering the revised approach. And the next meeting in November, there is the new corporate performance reporting coming to this committee, and we're going to look at picking up the monitoring within that report.
Go ahead.
Section 2.2, it talks about sort of a skills boot camp. I'd love to be able to help promote that. How can our local authorities use our press teams to try to get more take up on that?
Thank you. Yeah, it's really exciting opportunity. So we have run this in the previous year, and the take up was relatively modest, partly because of challenges amongst single traders to uh, take up the opportunity. We are talking through our comms group, where we meet with each of the comms leads from the individual councils, and we can certainly take that to them. I'm not sure if our procurement's finished yet, but there is a wider procurement for the region, which the Greater Southeast Net Zero Hub is procured. So there is going to be lots of activity in this space, and we're happy to take that away and bring it to the comms group.
What's the role of the business board in this?
So the funding at the moment is coming through both principally through the hub, but also our skills funding. I don't know what conversations they've had with the business board. I can certainly follow that up.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more. If you, we're going to have a discussion about budget later. Looking at the partnership group and its hopes for work in the future, do you see areas where you think we should be considering future funding?
Slightly preempting your discussion earlier, but I guess my chance to help the committee. So I think some key points for the committee to note is that your climate funding and nature funding were very much a sort of one-off block by the board and come to an end either next financial year or this financial year. So if the key areas of this committee's work you want delivery and work carried forward, then there would be a good case for putting in for extending that those two blocks of funding. We do a lot of convening, and we've established some really innovative groups. So Fenland Soil is a good example. Is working very hard, bringing farmers and government together around the issue around the fens peat. So again, there's an opportunity for funding some of those external groups. And I think you've mentioned Natural Cambridgeshire before, and they are delivering with us on the local nature recovery strategy. But we have a wider ambition amongst the authority for doubling nature, as we are one of the county areas with the least proportion of that wildlife rich areas. So again, a, a very strong case to support the work of Local Nature Partnership, which is a charity that we have supported with capacity funding and has done a lot of work on our behalf and continues to do so. The other area of the committee's work we've touched on very briefly, which is the commissioning work on the infrastructure barriers to growth, and that comes from our spatial planning budget, which again is sort of a time limited block. So as the issues around sustainable growth are very important, that's a block as well.
Thank you. And I gather Natural Cambridgeshire are getting a new chair fairly soon. So what I suggested to Steve when I spoke last week was that we invite them to come to our November meeting and have a chat to us just about, you know, what they want from us, how they see themselves working with us, and you know what they need in terms of money. You know, it'd be good to hear what their ask was, for them really to optimize, you know, what they can offer to us. Are we happy with that? Okay, thank you. More questions, Martin?
Thank you, Chair. In item 2.3, with the applicants, do we know exactly what projects they're talking about and how much funding they will require?
Thank you, Nick. Adrian, sorry.
Sorry, I was just finding my place. Yes, so Natural Cambridgeshire basically on our behalf are running the fund, and they have spoken to the applicants and appraised. There are three, and we're going to hear which three they are at the Natural Cambridgeshire meeting next week in terms of subject contract, but a number of those and all of the others we're working with to come back for a second round of funding so that we we look to maximise that. But I can certainly provide the three names.
A follow up?
Thank you for that. My second question, and maybe I should say I have an interest in this because I was a former employee of Network Rail as a signalman for 18 years. What is the timescale for the upgrade of Ely North Junction for the start and the established time of completion or estimated time of completion for item 2.6? Sorry, 2.4.
It's quite a big question.
I think I'd like to know the answer as well. There's been you'll be very aware, a campaign running for many years, really stepped up in the last 6 months or so. And we had our rail summit earlier in the summer, which is really focused around the Ely area enhancements. So the combined authority, the mayor and local authorities have been very clear, as have most partners, businesses as well, about the importance of Ely and the Ely North improvements. As yet, we still don't have a formal response to that from government, and I think there's continued effort to push the case, and we'll carry on doing that through the autumn, up to the autumn statement, and we'll do it through our devolution work and any channels that are open to us to make the case for that improvement, which has an excellent value for money assessment to it as well. Could go on talking about the benefits of it to the rest of the UK economy as well as to Cambridgeshire, but it's an important priority. So we don't have a date yet, but hope to have one soon. Thank you.
So are we, I mean, I'm assuming that, there's a little posse of MPs who are lobbying for this because MPs hunting as a pack are actually much more effective than ones by themselves. But I mean, actually, you might know more about that, Martin, than I do.
The upgrade of Ely North Junction has been ongoing for all the 18 years I was employed with Network Rail. There is a simple solution which I gave to Steve in an email, is that when Ely North, there was an accident in the Cardiff area, and so double block working was introduced in such junctions, which means a train has to be twice as far away before you send the next one in than it normally does to prevent the accident. But since then, we've had an upgrade with TPWS, which automatically stops a train if it goes past a red signal. It kicks its brakes on, and there's also AWS, which gives them an advance warning that they're coming up to a TB. So they've got two warnings, and so the need for double block working is no longer required in them type of junctions, but it's getting someone to sign that off as a safety element to move, and then you could increase the capacity now very cheaply, I would say, or cheaper than complete upgrade of the junction. But that could be the first phase, if you know what I mean, to start getting trains going.
Okay, so we just need to get the Treasury to realise that this isn't rocket science, and there's cheap solutions. Okay, thank you. Well, I think your expertise in this is actually going to be extremely valuable to us, both within this committee and wider than that as well. So thank you very much, Lorna.
Yeah. In what feels like a reprise of last time, I'm looking at the Climate Partnership Group page on the Combined Authorities website because there is one. There's a little bit about the group, which says that it brings together people to talk about things, but it has no budget and no powers. There's a bit about its mission, which is great. There's a list of 11 objectives with 2 footnotes. And then there's a somewhat out of date list of members. But there's no information about what they've been doing. There's no minutes, even abbreviated versions of minutes. I mean, I chair the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Flood and Water Partnership. And since I've done that, I've been pressing, and I'm very pleased that we finally got there to have abbreviated, condensed minutes published so that people can see what we're doing. I think the same ought to be here, even if we can't publish the whole thing. And I don't know why you can't publish the whole thing. I mean, there are 2 members of this body around the table here, perhaps you could tell us. But we ought to be able to tell people something about what's going on. But absolutely critically, you've got this summit coming up, and there's no mention whatsoever of the summit on the Climate Partnership page, which seems to me to be the first place to start. There's also no way of contacting anybody here. There are no contact details, no opportunity for people with an interest to engage, to find out how to get involved, to find out what's happening. And I just feel that so much more needs to be done with this if the Climate Partnership is actually to achieve what I hope it will achieve, because it will need heft from other people.
Yeah.
It will need to disseminate what it's doing. It will, at the bare minimum, need to put critical dates in partners' diaries. And all of that, I think, just needs looking at, please.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, everyone's aware that the combined authority has been going through a massive change and improvement program, and doing everything. It takes time to kind of catch up and get to the point of best practice. But we'll take that on board as quickly as we can. It'd be nice to use that page on the website to celebrate the good stuff and successes and grants where we've given them and they've actually delivered, and perhaps some links to some of our partner organisations. Adrian, do you want to comment on that at all?
Only to echo that point that we will take all those away and look at that page and make it a live page rather than a very much at the moment, which is just a sort of point in time. So we will pick that up.
We're not a big organisation, are we? We're quite thin, but points well made and well received. Isha.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions on 2.4. Sorry, one of them's it's a bit long-winded, but the EV charging points and the increase in introducing EV charging points. Recently, there's been a reduction in the number of electric vehicles that are being taken up because of lack of infrastructure, or the waiting times it takes to charge vehicles. So in one way, it's a good thing that we are looking to introduce more charging points, but at the same time, people are sort of holding back because they're worried that technology or is moving forward. How can you in the long term sort of protect against throwing loads of money at and saying establishing an infrastructure to find out, say, in 10 years' time, that infrastructure has become obsolete and there's new technology which is preferred? That's the first part.
Thank you very much. Now we did have an EV charging plan, didn't we? Which I'm not sure we ever really sort of came to full fruition. Where is that now?
I'll start on this, but Stephen, I want to add a bit more from the Transport Committee's perspective. But yes, we do have an EV charging strategy. We've recently had some additional government funding to support that. But you're right, there is always a danger of which technology. A lot of the charging that can go in can be quite easily replaced, though. Actually, the cost is mostly around getting the electric connection correct. And there's lots of different companies out there vying for the ability to put these in. And I know that our councils are talking collaboratively to make sure that there's a minimum standard applied. And so that's the focus of work at the moment around making sure, obviously, government has set the stall in terms of the future ban on fossil fuel engines, and therefore that is the direction. And I think we are doing as much as we can to support that rollout. But certainly, one of the challenges is making sure that we don't get redundant, stranded assets going forward.
Do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I can give you an example of something which is a concern going forward as well. So over the recent years, there's been an increase in, well, the council in Peterborough have wanted Hackney taxis to move towards the hybrid or electric vehicles. Those Hackney drivers are, although there's charging points in the city centres, they're actually now driving them on petrol because it's more economical for them rather than the cost of what they get from per mile on electric. Going forward, if we put all these in or increase our EV
charging points, but at the same time, there's not people using them because of the cost. Is there any way that we can counter that or ask the government for grants or funding for that?
Thank you, Adrian, and I'll bring in Steve.
So obviously, there's a huge challenge with the rollout of EVs coinciding with the cost of living crisis and the hike in energy prices. And obviously, there is a different tax regime for electricity rather than gas, which means that's particularly a challenge at the moment in terms of those considerations. Obviously, that's partly relating to the market and how that responds. So I think we certainly would be, as an authority, making that case about this needs to work for everyone, and there are different cases. And I know Cambridge City's done a lot as well on encouraging um, uh, electric Hackney carriages, but certainly, yeah, there's always going to be a challenge around the cost of transition, and that's something we've made that point to government around those costs.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really important sort of issue, and getting access to infrastructure and the power supply is really key. So we're successful in getting local electric vehicle infrastructure funding announced last week, that we've been able to move forward to tranche 2. So we've secured £400,000 to help shape a programme of investment that will be in the form of £5.4 million from next year. So that's really important for us to address exactly the sorts of questions I think that you're rightly raising. So looking at the charging infrastructure, looking at charge point accessibility, communications, and many other obstacles that are getting in the way at the moment of delivering what we want to see as a rollout of charging accessibility, but also take up. So yeah, we've got a plan emerging based on that funding that's coming from government, and we can certainly keep this committee updated on that. There's a paper going to the Transport Committee on Wednesday, actually. It has some detail in it. So if it's helpful, I can share that with members.
Thank you. So if you could share that paper with members of this committee. So, I mean, I've parked in a car park today with my electric car where there's no EV charging, which, which is a shame. It shouldn't be the case, particularly with local authority controlled car parks. But being very mindful that so much of our carbon emissions are down to transport in this area, do you feel that we are, this is a high enough priority for us here? Because actually, we are one of the areas with a huge burden of emissions from transport who actually really could benefit from this, from a fairly sort of small percentage of people transferring into electric vehicles. Should this be higher up our agenda?
I think so. We talked earlier about targets and data and so forth. I think transport, along with waste, I think is one of the biggest contributors to our climate crisis. So yes, I think we can do more to help ourselves. This is a start. It's not going to the 5.4 million will help, but I think there's a lot more collectively we can do as partners.
Thank you. Just aware I've been talking about it for years.
Yeah.
So Lorna.
Yeah, I want to say two things. Firstly, on transport and emissions, I would have to say I think a lot of that is down to the big roads, the A14, the A1, and all of those over which we have less control than what we do as individuals and as communities. But nonetheless, transport is hugely significant, particularly in South Cambridgeshire and in Huntingdonshire, and it's something we've really got to tackle. But the other thing I wanted to say was that it is noticeable, and every time I open my phone, I get another flurry of about 20 links to articles in the right-wing press, the Express, the Mail, the Telegraph in particular, attacking the concept of electric vehicles. There is an organised campaign in the right-wing media to try to discourage people from taking up the electric car option, and pressure on government to abandon the idea of its moratorium on, or its end date for fossil fuel cars. I think my favourite example of the genre was the one, and they're usually entitled something like "I bought my electric car and now I'm giving it back and here's why," is usually the clickbait headline. My favourite was "I bought my electric car, brought it home, needed to charge it, and suddenly realised I lived in a Glasgow tenement." I mean, many of them aren't really realistic, but nonetheless, it is clear that there is an organised programme to try to discourage the transition to electric vehicles nationally, incessantly. And I really would say that we as local politicians in Cambridgeshire and everywhere really have to hold our nerve and get on with it and make it the best experience it can be for our residents, so that they are not sucked into this national agenda that is trying to destroy the concept of electric cars and try to undermine the move away from fossil fuels. I think it's really important that we stay very focused on that and really do our very best.
Thank you. So I think the best we can do is lead by example. But I think the important thing we take away from this is that we review the priority that we are addressing EV charging with. Do you want to come back, Ishak?
Sorry, yes, it was just on another point within 2.4. It mentions about more, active travel measures or introduce and including plans for more active travel measures. I'm guessing that means stuff like ULEZ zones and 15-minute cities. Is that right? Or am I
I
wrong?
think it's more cycling and walking, isn't it?
Is it cycling?
Yeah. Adrian?
Okay, that's fine.
Active travel. It's really cycling, walking options, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
the funding from
Yeah.
government is about promoting active travel modes, which principally is cycling and walking support.
Okay. All right. So if there's no more questions, again, we've been asked to note this report, so we've duly done that. And now we're going on to item 9, which is budget and performance report. And we've got Tim, have we? Sorry, who's? Robert's doing it. Oh, hello, Robert. Sorry, I've had the wrong name here. Hi. Hello, Robert. Over to you.
Good morning. I don't think you did have the wrong name. Tim and I are doing it as a duo. Tim's introducing your regular budget monitoring update, and I'm here to talk to you about the medium-term financial planning process. So if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll hand over to Tim.
Thank you. Hello, Tim.
Hi. Good morning, Chair and members. I'd just like to talk to you about the first part of the report today, which is to do with the revenue and capital monitor up to 31st of July 23. First part of the report looks at the revenue budget, paragraph 3.1, table 1. Small variance to date against our expected budget, but full year forecast, we're expecting those budgets to be fully spent as expected. Moving on to capital expenditure in 4.1 and table 2. Again, some underspend on the budget to date, most of which we expect to be on track by the end of the year, apart from the care home refit programme, which we are expecting some of that expenditure to slip into the next financial year.
Thank you very much. So I think one of the questions probably going to come in relation to the care home retrofit programme is, what are we doing to make sure that because my understanding is that we didn't get much uptake for it. So what are we doing to make, to try and publicise it, make sure that its benefits are felt throughout the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and that it is delivering really value for money, so it's going to the right places? Adrian.
Thank you. Yes, one of my programs. So we have had expressions of interest from a number of independent care homes. We are just about to issue the full application form to those. So we've been behind on the actual sort of getting them approved and underway, hence the delay. But we do have expressions of interest in. We were working with those who didn't apply to see if there are any particular barriers that if we changed some of the parameters might be help. A number of them said they weren't intending to invest in the current financial year and had slightly sort of medium-term investment plans, and so therefore they weren't able to apply now because our program was essentially now and next year. So we're talking to those about whether we can find a way of them bringing forward their match funding
approach.
So I know Martin wanted to ask about match funding, so I'll let him ask that question.
Yes, with a lot of these smaller that run these houses or small homes, they're on a very limited budget. Do they have to supply amount of money up front themselves and we add to it, or can they get a loan as effectively and pay that back over a period of time, or is it you pay 50%, I have 50%, move on with it?
So it is a match fund program. So it's a 50-50 approach between our funding and that of the care homes. And that was recognizing both there is the challenge of them investing in their property, but also they are businesses who do need to invest in their assets. And so it was decision of the board to make it a match funding program. We are looking at how we can make that work as best with the nature of the organization with perhaps not large financial reserves. So our normal approach on these would be payment in arrears against invoices, and we are just sort of considering whether there's any stage payments that we could make to sort of ease that process. Obviously, the principle of in arrears is reducing the risk to the combined authority, so we do have to balance that. But we are looking at that as best we can. But it is a matched funding program.
It's tricky, isn't it? You know, in this climate as well, when businesses don't have much cash swooshing around, really, isn't it? Okay, all right. Well, I'm glad to hear you're looking at that. Martin, you had some other questions, didn't you? And then I'll come to Lara.
Yep. It was already brought up earlier about the dissemination of the program out to other people. Have we disseminated it to the different councils as well to get in contact with their homes in their area to see if they can adapt?
Yes, we worked with both the Care Quality Commission and the County Council, who fund obviously the individual or a number of the individual residents to get the list and to work with them to approach the care home. So we did have a good response in terms of feedback from the care homes, and obviously we'll look at any that haven't come back to us. If there is a role that we can see for local councils to support that, but in a sense, we had a very good approach with talking to the county council who had those contacts.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Laura.
It appears that we're in the enviable position of discussing a budget underspend, which is quite unusual. But in some cases, that's actually worrying. If I look at our capital expenditure, Adrian, you explained that 400,000 of the underspend is that care home project, which you discussed. But it means there is another 400,000 underspend, which I'm wondering if that's actually the projects being delayed or the reporting or the payments being delayed, sort of seeking some reassurance that there's nothing to worry about there.
So my understanding is that everything bar the care homes is on track to spend up to budget. So this is more, it's not so much underspend as it has sort of flow of money. Do you want to? Am I right there?
So in terms of the program, so the care home retrofit year to date is zero because we haven't issued those formal confirmations. In terms of the others, in terms of capital spend, that is all underway apart from the Net Zero Villages program. So that hasn't been launched yet. So there is a risk around the 200,000, but we have been looking at that program. It's about small scale funding to communities and it's not matched. So we do imagine that it will be able to meet that target once we've got the program out. I can't comment on the HUG ones, but they're on target anyway because that's not my area.
That's fine. So on the net zero villages one, we're managing that, are we? Because I mean, in South Cambs, we give out 100 grand a year, I think, for zero carbon communities, we call it, which is up to £15,000 for communities to put in EV charging, photovoltaics on the community centre, you know, the sensory garden, plant a forest, that sort of thing. I mean, are we? So, I mean, I imagine it's a fairly similar model.
Yes, it is. And we are talking to councils about their own schemes to see if there are any opportunities to complement what local authorities are doing and obviously not create confusion amongst communities. But yes, it's for small scale grants for energy efficiency measures of a sum of about I don't recall which way we did it, but it was a sort of 20,000 sort of level of investment.
Okay. I mean, is there an argument for sort of getting, you know, us being the accountable body and our partner authorities actually divvying out the money?
So certainly an option. Obviously, we took the business case through the board, but in terms of implementation of it, we're still designing the exact scheme. And the issue would be just making sure that as it's a combined authority wide scheme, that there was a sort of equality of access to that. But getting suggestions from councils in terms of priorities could be one way of accelerating delivery.
Good. Well, I mean, I'm sure you've looked at the South Cam scheme. I think it's very good, and it's quite sort of restricted in what it'll fund, so it makes it fairly easy for people. But I'm sure Hunts has something similar as well.
At our next meeting, could we have an update on those two issues, to the care home program and the net zero villages? And on the care home, when the businesses are trying to find their share of the funding, is that something that we should be encouraging them apply for SIL funding to do? Or is that within for their part?
Don't ask me how SIL works.
All right, I'll go away and think about that. Thank you.
I mean, certainly any opportunity to support them in match funding would be very beneficial. There's obviously potential energy savings to the business as well, depending on what measures they put in. So there is a sort of invest to save argument as well around that.
Thank you. Any other points? No, we're all good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. So we'll look at those in a little bit more detail at our next meeting, when hopefully, you know, they've all moved on a bit. So again, let me just find out where I am. Okay, right. So second. Okay, so over to Rob now. Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. And firstly, I just need to apologise to the committee, as there is a mistake in the table of Appendix 1 of this report. The eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that according to the table produced, the HUG2 capital programme finishes at the end of 23-24. That is absolutely not the case. Funding agreement from government runs till March 2025, and there should be budgets in for those lines within your report. The rest of the report, however, shows your position for the next 4 years. As the paper sets out, September really marks the beginning of the Combined Authorities business planning cycle for 24-25 and the medium-term financial plan for the 3 years after that. Officers are engaged at the moment, and I know because I keep asking them about it, to make sure that the baseline NTFP budgets and forecasts are updated to reflect the world we're in today, rather than one we were in 6 to 12 months ago when the budgets that you've got in front of you today were set, whether that's the impact of inflation moving on or new funding announcements from government. I know there's several in the pipeline for the net zero hub that would be added onto this. All of that information, once it's brought together at the end of September, will create a recosted medium-term financial plan. So that shows everything the Combined Authority is already planning to deliver. What's it going to cost? What are our income streams to pay for it? All forecast out for the next 4 years. Alongside this, officers and members through committee meetings like this, through leaders' strategy and through board, will be asked to talk about proposals for savings and investments. And those proposals, those suggestions will be collated as threats and opportunities brought forward. And those will be taken on through to form the ideas to be put in as proposals for inclusion in the NTFP. So the difference there is anything we're contractually already signed up to, that goes into our recosted one. and anything that's optional is then taken as a series of options through that process. This then is the committee's first opportunity to review the shape of their budgets for the next 4 financial years and provide any feedback or steers to us as officers to where you see those threats and opportunities to your remit over the next years. That feedback will inform the officers supporting the committee in their input to this work they're doing in September, collecting ideas, threats and opportunities, which will result in that recost MTFE being presented along with savings and investment proposals to chairs of these committees via leader strategy in October. And then ultimately that'll feed through into your November meeting where you'll see that recosted MTFP showing our updated financial position for the next 4 years. So really this is just your opportunity to give us a steer, to let us hear what your thoughts and concerns are around what you're up to for the next few years. Officers, myself included, of course, are happy to answer any questions the committee have to inform your thinking, and all your feedback will be captured. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. So it was quite bad sound. I don't know if it was just me, but I think I've got most of it. Right. Any points that people want to make? We're being asked for input here. Laura?
Well, I have lots of ideas.
Jolly
If
good.
there's money out
Fire
to spend,
away.
and so I will probably send them to
You're going to
Steve.
send an email.
But
Okay.
I suppose I would highlight one. So in our capital expenditure, that Huntingdonshire Biodiversity for All project, it's just been going from strength to strength. And I think it's perhaps reaching the point at which if we were to allocate some funding in future years, that learning could be shared out amongst the other local authorities in the work that we're doing there. Essentially, we have a job centre in the building across the way. Job seekers are taking up the opportunity to learn green skills in Huntingdonshire at the same time creating habitats and recovering nature. So yes, I would love it if we would consider that.
Thank you. Do we consider that the allocation for climate change is sufficient? I mean, it's, bearing in mind the recommendations of the Commission, which said it was 700 million a year. We haven't quite got that in the budget. But do we need to review actually, really what we need in order to actually make some impact? So kind of Steve's smiling. Come on, Steve.
I'd be really interested in member views on that, and I suppose it's the role that the combined authority can play in supporting partners in achieving the net zero ambitions that we have. So I think it was mentioned earlier, capital programme that we have was agreed some time ago that there isn't any further funding on the capital funding side to have another wave of projects. Is that important for members to think, well, maybe we should prepare some thoughts and proposals on that? On the revenue side, we are enabling and facilitating a lot of activity across a number of partners that have got crucial roles to play in achieving, whether it's doubling nature or our net zero ambition. So similarly, do members want us to continue, the combined authority to continue to enable and facilitate that to happen in line with the Climate Commission's initial findings? So rather than answer the question, I think I'd put the question and we can then take that away, I think, as Rob has said, between now and November, and work up some further details.
So I think we need to be benchmarking it against the Climate Commission's recommendations to make sure that we are doing our best to deliver. On the element of see, our role is to fill the gaps, isn't it? There's lots of things in that report which are other people's responsibility, but there's a heck of a lot there which actually doesn't land on anybody's door. So is it not our responsibility to fill in those gaps and fund things accordingly? Lorna.
Sorry, going back to a previous conversation, I would have thought that this was what the climate partnership would have been talking about, and that it would have been the climate partnership gathering together all of these ideas and advising this body and others on the best use of the resources that we have as the combined authority and as our constituent members. Surely this is what the climate partnership should be doing, as its core function.
Yes, Laura?
I think if we look at the report we were talking about earlier, the RAG rating of the actions that goes to that partnership, the ones that are red are showing where we need to have more climate budget to be able to address them, like the adaptation element, where we really haven't done anything yet in terms of preparing Cambridgeshire for adaptation. And there might be themes of, say, across the county, right now, when we have a building program, we want native species, but maybe in 20 years, those native species need to be different because our climate will be different. So as a partnership, how do we use that adaptation area? We're going to need the climate change budget. And I agree that I don't think what's in there so far enough to address all those issues.
No, I'm tempted to agree with you. But again, going back to the fact that, you know, we are a lean organization. And, you know, I think we've got to be factoring in budgets for us either to upskill, you know, increase our man and woman power within the organization, or have the money to outsource stuff to other organizations who can deliver. So I think, you know, I'd like to understand that actually we can either buy in the expertise we need to make a real difference, or actually, you know, yeah, give poor Adrian somebody else to some other people to work with in order to help deliver it all. Okay, I mean, I've both Lara and I have mentioned about Natural Cambridge, and we feel that it's really, you know, there's such a um, core organisation for us that actually we should be looking at what their real costs are in order to deliver on our programme, and we should be considering funding them in totality for that, because I know they scrabble around for bits and bods of money from all the local authorities. I've no idea if all the local authorities pay up, but it's not a good situation. So I think Steve has said he'll have a conversation with them. There's one thing I didn't know what it was. What is the Lifebelt City portrait? I'm sorry, I don't know what that is.
It's a data visualization piece of work that was done. So it was one of the bids that came in under the climate, and it was about looking at the sort of the new low carbon economy in the context of Cambridge City. So it was Cambridge City that did it. They were exploring how essentially you could present that information online in a sort of more interactive way. So that project has been essentially done at that phase, but obviously it might
to that, because I'd be really interested in that. So
I will find out.
That's really kind of you. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, other Laura?
One other topic we might consider in future budgets, as nature recovery becomes more and more important, both in the planning process and the strategy, the role of ecologists, they'll become like gold dust. Their salaries go up. There are fewer of them than all of us need. And I suppose we need to think forward about, as a region, how are we going to resolve that? But also, I know my ecologists have been approached by several different types of technology that they might be able to use to make them use their time more efficiently. So mapping of areas so that they start off already with a bit of a data set to begin with. And I'm wondering if things like those are available, whether communally we might be able to commission them rather than each district, making our ecologists' jobs more efficient.
Thank you. Yes, the last two environmental officers roles we advertised, I think we had no applicants. So they are like gold dust. And I think there are opportunities for us to be working with the Oxford-Cambridge Partnership, which of course is, you know, kind of starting from scratch to some degree, though not on the environmental work. But I think, you know, I think we risk some duplications. I think we need to be really, you know, getting to grips with what they're planning as well. Okay, all right, we'll move on. So Laura's going to email you lots of stuff. I'm sure everybody else will email you lots of stuff, and then we'll deal with that later. So again, that's to be noted. And now we're looking at the agenda plan next. Any? So let me just get it up. Right, is this is just for noting? Everybody happy with that? Okay, and now we have to, we've now got so that's been noted. Item 11 is there's an exempt appendix in the next report, which has been circulated to members separately. I'd like to propose that we refrain from discussing the detail contained within the exempt appendix so that we can remain in public session. But if any members not happy to do that, could they let me know so we can move into closed session? Are we all happy with that? Okay, we're right. So we'll stay in open session. Open session. Righty ho. So this is the affordable housing programme, the Halo swap from SN developments to Vistry units, and I think we're back to Asma now. Thank you, Asma. We've been working very hard on this, I know.
Thank you, Chair. Right. I'll start off with a little bit of history just to sort of fill members, because you've not been here before, so you won't know the story. When we've had issues with projects falling, we then look at alternative swaps that we can do. Halo has been one of those projects that come through. They are a shared ownership product. They are a turnkey style organization, so they get properties that are built and they give it out to people who can afford shared ownership in the combined authority area. I'm looking today to get recommendation from the committee to approve the swap from New Road Haddenham to the Vistry site in ECDC and SCDC. There are 11 units being swapped for 12. In late 2021, this project initially came to us from Haddenham. I presented the project to committee. It was for SN Developments and Allison Homes. Allison Homes have provided their 16 units. SN Developments was an agreement with Halo and themselves to bring 11 properties from the Haddenham site. It's providing 24 units on site. 11 of those were going to be shared ownership and coming through the affordable housing programme. As you can see from the narrative in the report, Halo and I have had some conversations, and they had said at the initial time of presenting this project, they had some sort of formalised heads of terms agreed verbally with SN Developments. However, SN Developments, as you see in the statement, were actively engaging at that point, but asked them to put a hold on things while they were dealing with other issues. The plots then had started back in January 22. I went and visited the site on the first occasion and then confirmed start on site to DLUC. I have also been back to the site on a second visit at the end of July 2023. Unfortunately, the site has started, but has not really progressed very far in the months preceding. The development is silent. There are no builders on the site, and building work is very minimal. They have one property that's built up to roof level, but no roof, and the rest is golden brick. I have been in contact with Halo for the last 18 months over it, and Halo have confirmed in the middle of last year that they were not getting any contact from SN Developments, and this has progressed to why we have come today with this recommendation for a swap. On speaking to Halo and advising them of my visit just recently, Halo have then tried to communicate again with SN Developments and have done a further due diligence. They have confirmed in their due diligence that SN Development has moved from a moderate to a high risk situation, and they are no longer willing to proceed with this project. They have now said, on the fact of that, they are looking to work with other house builders, such as Vistry, that are currently in the CPCA area. This is unfortunate that we are losing the units at Haddenham, but it's not a situation that I can deal with. It's a business decision made by Halo. They have therefore gone to Vistry, and Vistry have said, we can provide you with 12 units, 10 of those in the ECDC area and 2 in SCDC. 2 units are in All Angels Park, which I have presented previously in committee, and the other 10 units are in Ely and Littleport. The sites are Quantum Fields and Willows Woods. I've had no serious objections from the LAs, including ECDC and SCDC. They're all quite happy to accept the units, except there are some issues with the east-west rails for South Cambs. I understand that. Halo have stated that many people live near railway stations. They've never had any problems selling units, taken that on board. And East Cambridgers have no objections and support the swap. These units will be shared ownership. Again, 50% of the share will be sold and the rest will be acquired on a small rental charge. And some of these units are due to complete by the end of January 2024.
Thank you, Asma. That was very, very clear indeed. So it's obviously disappointing for residents of Haddenham, but as you've said, this is a commercial decision, and we are the bankrollers really, and don't have that much control. Martin, obviously, I'm sure you want to respond initially.
Yes, thank you for that comprehensive report. Um, when I first read this, my hackles went up because just the statement saying contact has not yet been made with the enabling officer at ECDC, and then later on 10 units have been received with no objection from ECDC. How can you get an objection if you're not made contact? I then saw Sally Bonnell, our officer, and we spoke, and she said she's just received emails from you. Um, I asked her if there was any problems, and she says no, we can go ahead. So we've got no objections. It's just statements like that don't help.
Sorry, but when I wrote this report, it was in August, which is the same time that I wrote the initial, affordable housing implementation program update. So when I actually emailed Sally, she was on leave. When I came back, I was able to sort of get her response. So I do apologise. I wanted to let everybody know that I had made contact with them, and then later on, they had already said to me there's no objections, but I was waiting for a formal written statement from Sally Bonnet, and I did get that. So I do apologise, but it was just that the timings.
Thank you. And other points? Okay. Any other questions relating to this, Lara?
I was really happy to hear in terms of geography that most of the properties will still be in the East Cambs, so that geographically they're not losing out there. But in section 7.1, you also mentioned Peterborough. Can I just check that that's a typo rather than something else I haven't understood?
Okey-doke. Any more questions? Okay, so we've got recommendations on this. Okay, so we do need you to do more than note it. So right, so we have been invited to A, agree to terminate the Halo grant funding agreement to acquire units from SN Developments with CPCA dated the 28th of January 2022. And B, approve the site swap from New Road Haddenham, 11 units, to the Vistry, 12 units, and to approve the use of the allocated funding of £528,750 for these units. So I think there's general consensus in support of the recommendations. Yeah, okay, that's lovely. So I propose to take both recommendations forward to the vote. If anyone disagrees, then please raise their hands now. No, and so I see no objections. So we'll take the recommendations as carried. Okay, happy with that. And I think that brings us swiftly to the end. And the next meeting is Monday, the 13th of November at 10 o'clock back here. So thank you very much for all your attention. There's been quite a lot of quite complicated stuff there. Thank you very much to all the officers for their contributions. Thanks a lot. And we'll